All right, thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Automating Work in Process Tracking with RFID. If we could go to the next slide here. A little bit about AIM. We are the Industry Association for Automatic Identification and Data Capture Technologies. We serve as a hub for quality resources covering all types of barcode, RFID, and mobile computing information. We also foster new auto ID innovations that stimulate market growth. We encourage you to get involved. If you would like additional information, you can reach out to us at info@aimglobal.org. And on the next slide here, we have the AIM antitrust policy. It is the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activities shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And then on this next slide here, we have a few other housekeeping notes. All registrants are muted upon entering the webinar, but we still want you to participate. To send a question, select the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, and also a recording of the webinar will be available in the coming days to those that have registered. And then the next slide here, we have our presenters for today, Adam Overbo. He's a Senior Warehouse Manager, CAES by Honeywell, and Neil Obert, the President of Factory Sense RFID. And with that, I will turn it over to you guys.
Great, thanks, Bethany. So today we're going to talk about my journey through RFID, why we went to RFID, why we did what we did, and then basically the process of going from one to another, active to passive, and then Neil's going to talk to everybody about the system design and implementation, and then we'll take some questions and answers, or questions at the end of it. Next slide. Yep. So CAES, we are a defense contractor, and now we were recently purchased by Honeywell in September of 2024. But our journey started a lot longer before that. We started our RFID journey in 2017 when we were, if you want to go to the next slide, when we were given a corrective action by one of our large customers, and it was we were forced to provide confidence in locating WIP when asked for it. We were able to find it, but it took a lot longer than it should have, and so we looked at RFID as our go-to choice. So as you can see here, we are in San Diego. We have 6 buildings spread about the campus here in Kearney Mesa. We have multiple stock rooms throughout the campus. I believe there are 4 stock rooms, a warehouse associated with that. And then we have clean rooms, labs, closed areas, several different ingress, egress areas to provide us with a lot of opportunity to move that material and hopefully find it when we go to move it. So next slide. Again, it's a manufacturing environment. We've got tens of thousands of components and raw materials. WIP is throughout the facility. We have anywhere from, I don't know, 1,000 to 3,000 units running around at any time within the operation. And it moves between operations within a building and then operations in buildings, in separate buildings too. So there's just a lot of movement of our WIP. Our expediters get a lot of mileage on their feet, and there's a lot of challenges as we have rework, and we have to backtrack at times. So and that's where our RFID really started. So if you want to go to the next slide. So our challenge was really locating material when we when we needed to. And as I think everybody on this call will understand, is that time is money. And if you have a unit that you're looking at on your ERP system, and you're trying to look for it, and that's all you've got going for you, chances are you're going to have to walk that process, and then you're going to have to look into those rework areas. And that's really what was going with us. And so we had to do something, especially since we got a corrective action. I think that the last bullet is pretty important. Before RFID, the best we could do when a kit was misplaced, we spent time searching and we sent out a bolo. We were doing 2 to 3 bolos a month. And you know, in all honesty, we located the units. It just took a lot longer. There was a lot of hope involved, and a lot of sweat and tears too. But we did end up locating them, but it was just not as quickly as we needed, and especially for the customers that we were trying to perform for.
So Adam, what's real quick? So what is a bolo? Can we dive into that just a little
Beyond,
bit? What was that
yeah, no
process?
problem. Be on the lookout. It's an email. We'd send it to our security team, and they send it out and ask everybody in their respective areas to look around for a particular order. We'd, you know, part number, work order, and quantity. And then we just, again, it was hoping that they would respond to it. And at the same time, you'd put boots on the ground and start walking the process.
And
And
then
it was painful. It was really painful.
and can we, to the extent that you're able to, can we talk about WIP? Because I think what you guys have in your factory floor is fairly common in aerospace, where you have a lot of these kits that are, you know,
Yep.
kitted and sent to production, and
Yeah.
identifying from the other. Can you maybe just talk a little bit through that? Because I'd like it
Yeah,
would
no
be
worries.
for people to understand what it is that what this environment looks like, because yours is pretty common in terms of what a lot of manufacturers see.
Yeah, so we have the standard kit box. I believe it's I don't know, 8, 9 inches long by 6 inches wide, 4 inches deep. The gray kit boxes, a lot of they're ESD. Um, and then we have a tag on the front of that, and we do use some color coding for the different value streams that we have within our operation, but other than that, they all look pretty much the same, and so that makes the challenge that much greater. We do have some larger boxes that we call they're the big black boxes. It's very professional. Those are ESD corrugated ESD boxes for the larger units that go through the factory. So when doing a bolo, it is difficult because everything looks pretty much the same, and so RFID really was the right answer for us. So that's where we went. Yeah, so our first attempt was an active system. It had batteries that you put in it, and placed them inside the whip kits. We had some the base stations that were set up were honestly, they were iPhones. So it wasn't the most sophisticated system. Um, I can tell you that it satisfied the original issue, and so we got the corrective action cleared. But you want to move to the next? I think the next slide has some. Yeah. So the challenges, but these are the issues that we had with this active system. It wasn't precise with the location. Um, they were expensive, very expensive, not easily to translate, or really the the system that we had was not real simple for us. Software was clunky, and then the constant battery replacement. And because our units would stay on the floor for an extended period of time, there were a lot of times that the batteries would go dead while they were on the floor, so we would lose traceability in the event that we needed to locate something. So next slide.
I think
Oh,
when we
so no, sorry, Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to sort of jump on that. I think when we started our engagement, I want to say maybe half of them had dead batteries. So
Yeah.
a lot of that battery issue is a big frustration. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, it just wasn't the right fit for us. I'm sure there are excellent uses for active RFID. But in our case, it just wasn't the right solution. And so we really needed to reach out and try and find the right solution. And I had known about passive from my earlier life in watching law firms and tracking their files. And when I found out that Factory Sense had an opportunity or a solution, that's when we reached out to Neil and his team. Because we obviously didn't want to give up on the technology, but we certainly didn't want to continue to feed these units with batteries, and it was kind of a hope. And I will go back to the other piece of this was uh, the 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 operators thought that it was FOD, even though we had communicated it out. When we first put this system in place, we had these units getting thrown away, um, scrapped. It was crazy. And everybody thought they were doing the right thing, and so I respect that. But gosh dang, we were we were challenged even with our own standards. So by putting a label on it made a big difference. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we connected with Neil and his team.
Yeah. So we'll just start. I guess I'll jump in at this point and maybe
Yeah, go
start
for it, dude.
talking about
Yep.
what the process looked like. Because again, I think the use case there is very typical of what we see across the board. And to Adam's points, I think the overwhelming push was to find a system that was going to be extremely reliable and is going to follow the KISS principle, right? We just want to keep it simple. We're sort of really looking for meat and potatoes. How can we solve this problem in a way that's going to be reliable and low effort? And so the good part of that business, having had some experience with Active, is that I think they had that understanding of the technology can solve the problem. To Adam's point, it was just more of a fit issue. And so the first step for us is to say, okay, let's take our lessons learned from what's working, from what's not working, from the legacy system. And we did a site survey. And almost all of our engagements with all of our customers will start with some form of a site survey. And a site survey, if you haven't done one with RFID before, is a whole lot more than just a walkthrough. We're looking at, okay, how granular do you want the coverage to be? Where do you want to have RFID? Where don't you want? In a lot of aerospace manufacturing, and Honeywell CAES environment is no different. There are places that you specifically cannot be aiming radio signals because of some very sensitive operations. And so we have to be respectful of that in a way that Active ID really couldn't. And then we looked at like the materials to be tracked, right? Are we just tracking WIP? Are we tracking assets? And to Adam's point, how can we do it in a way where the operators won't have a thing that they will think is a foreign object to be thrown out, right? So in his case, it turned out to be, well, we're just going to put stickers on the back of the paper cards that go on the WIP totes. But how do we sort of, I don't want to say idiot proof it. How do we make it as just bulletproof as we can? And then obviously, there's a lot of talk about security requirements and how can we give this sort of cloud hosted, super, super secure system in a way that it's going to be able to tie into the customer's environment. So what ERP systems are we talking to? Is there a WMS that we need to deal with? What are the software interfaces? Because it's one thing to be able to pull it up in Factory Sense. It's another to be able to have that data pushed into the customer's system. And that's oftentimes a lot of what we do. And so really, as we concluded that process, and again, from our perspective, we can support active, we can support passive, we can do ultra wideband. There's no limit there. But really, in the sort of scale manufacturing context, you're going to see passive RFID doing a lot of the heavy lifting because it solves so many of the pain points that are present in these active systems. Right? There's no batteries. With a passive system, the antennas do very directional reading. And so we can really carve out very precise read zones and get very granular location data on what is where across a factory floor, whether it's in building 1 or building whatever. Is it at a transition point? Is it on the road? The other thing is the overall cost for the tags. Well, I've got a slide on that in a second, but cost is another big factor. It's something that we always have to be mindful of. Everybody thinks, ooh, it's RFID, it's new technology, I have a shiny new toy, it's going to be super expensive. But we're also trying to solve a business problem here. And we're not just trying to sort of shove technology into a location for the fun of it. We have to find a way to do some cost benefit analysis. And passive, by virtue of the fact that these tags are a few pennies a piece versus tens of dollars, really fits the bill there, because you know, there's a difference between tracking a few things and having scale manufacturing. And again, you know, by virtue of the things that happen on that site, we found that we could actually increase coverage using passive RFID, because we could directionally point antennas away from secure areas, whereas with active, the keep away zones are 100 meters or more away, because that is an uncontrolled emitter. An active tag and an active base station will emit like a donut omnidirectionally. You can't really do much about that, but with passive, we have the ability to directionally adjust the signal. So we can actually increase coverage with this technology. So just a note on sort of the cost difference as well. What we found over time is that the trade-offs between active and passive at the cost side tend to favor active in very, very, very small deployments. So that being tracking less than around 1,000 or so items. The trade-off is with passive, you need more fixed infrastructure, more readers, more antennas to get a very precise fix on your location of your materials. And those carry a certain cost, whereas the active base stations, you need few of them and they're much less expensive. However, the trade-off for that is the marginal cost per tag. So if you are tagging, you know, again, around the key point seems to almost always come in around 1,000 items. If it's a little less than 1,000 items, then active will actually have a lower net cost. But again, you know, increasing the scale of your tracking system by every incremental unit starts to come way out of whack on the active side once you pass that threshold, because every additional thing that you're putting a tag on becomes another $20, $30, $40, whatever the particular tag you're using is, versus a few pennies. So on the costing side, that's where that tended to be, that's where that trade-off tends to be found. And again, I think in this particular case, that they really weren't, I think, an exception to that. So we've ended up, I think, with a much less expensive long-term plan too. And then the last bit is the implementation plan. And Adam, I think this is one probably we can talk about together, right? So
Yeah.
Since we're migrating from a legacy system to this one, we have the question of what do we want to do with all the old data, right? We have more read zones now than we had before. So, you know, do we want to map that data? What were some of the considerations, I think, that you guys had when we were at this point in the transition?
Well, migrating the old data or starting fresh, that was a difficult situation, because we would have had to go out and we would have had to tag every single one of our units that were on the floor. So we decided to allow the whip to basically die, or the RFID to die with that whip. And then we started fresh with right from the front end, kitting the material, putting it in the kit box, and then placing the RFID tags on those units.
Yeah.
And then deciding, you know, what material we really wanted to tag. And what we found is with the labels, I think I'm probably going ahead a little bit, but that's okay. It was we could tag more units because of the cost factor, and just the way our structure is set up. So.
Yeah. And let's talk about the tagging strategy too, because that is something that again, I know you had it at your site,
Yeah.
but we
Mhm.
see this in so many contexts where there's not a consistent plan that's followed that's very, very, very simple, right?
Yeah. And
Something
so we had basically our entry points were used, and so everybody got an RFID printer, and so it's not you're not having an operator get out of the chair, walk to another building, print out the labels. It was very, very simple, and again, the cost associated was relatively low, so we could do that. And it was and entering this into the system is very easy too. Using a scanner, you can scan all of the items that you need into it. And if you have mass entry, you can do a mass download, and then it pumps out those labels very, very easily.
Yeah. Yep. But again, it's all based on a plan, right? And so
Yep.
even
Yeah.
if we threw you guys into the technology and said, here you go, Adam and company, have fun. I don't think if you didn't have a really solid and simple plan that people could follow consistently, right? Do you think your results would be the same if they were putting the tags everywhere and there wasn't a consistent plan, right? It would be.
Yeah. So one of the things that your team did, Neil, is you guys provided us um, with manuals, basically a user manual for a front end operator and then for an administrator. And it was a step by step where to place it. Oh, wait, how to create it, where to place it, and then how to move it.
Yeah.
Because with our material, there's metal. And so you have to make sure that you're putting that label on the outside, and then the readers are able to capture that on the outside. That was a really big piece of the rollout.
Yeah.
There you go, our deployment experience. Perfect. Uh, um, and this is Neil and his team did a phenomenal job of deploying it. They were there every step of the way, and they had their team on site providing that training to our team until we were comfortable enough with it to do it ourselves. Um, yeah, the hardware system setup came first. We worked with the facilities, security, IT, making sure that we were dotting the I's and crossing the T's all the way through. And again, Factory Sense was right there with us. They had some experience in that, so it was fairly simple.
Yeah.
Yep.
And training is key. Lots and lots and lots and lots of hands-on training to make sure that you
Yes.
understand, right? Because once you've
Yeah.
done your first one's really hard, your 10th one's kind of once you've done 100 of them, you're an expert, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the good part is we got everybody going, and then it was then they were training themselves, and we were able to, and then handing the manual out to somebody with step by step was excellent. So our coverage, it's ingress egress in all buildings, and then throughout the facility, we have a bus route that we use, and so the readers are set up along the bus route too, and then in main ingress egress of those areas within those buildings. It's we just, again, it was back to that plan, walking the building, figuring out how do we, how can we make a mess and then fix that mess before you make the mess, right? Find out where your risk is, and then mitigate it as quickly and as easily as possible.
Yeah.
So
And also I would say too, this is where the cost factor comes back in as well, right? It's not just where can I make a mess, where am I going to get in trouble? It's how can I capture that trouble using as little hardware as I need, right? To be
right,
able to make sure that we can turn this in with a reasonable budget. Um,
correct.
and typically, again, it's sort of across the board. It typically tends to be choke points or sort of key areas that materials will transition from
Yeah,
one process to another or one state to another. That's what we tend to see over and over and over. We can put a sort of eye in the sky. And I was at another facility, actually not far from yours, a couple months ago, and I saw there's read heads. I think it was like every 10 or 20 feet, and it was just so overkill of a prior installation. I think the vast majority of that equipment actually is going to get repurposed.
mm,
But right, it's always it always comes back again to where am I going to get reasonable coverage, and how can we do that in a cost effective way? Because this is all at the end in service of a business case.
right. I mean, this is a I hate to say it, it's non-value add. You're doing this to protect yourself. I look at myself. If this is an insurance policy, we don't know we have RFID until we have a problem, and then we have to reach out to it. And we want to be able to make sure that we can follow the steps to locate it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we had the coverage is much better with the with the passive. The software better. The audit trails, which is, when you're looking at the software, it'll tell you where the unit has moved, so you can kind of get a sense of where that's going. And I think that there is an upgrade coming very, very soon that shows a little trail across the site. So there's some really, there's some cool stuff that you can do with it. But without that, we're able to track that unit, figure out, okay, why did it come into this area? Why was it there for 24 hours? Why did it move from there? Why was it there for 8 minutes? Why did it go, and then start asking those people questions. Yeah, and big thing is no batteries at all.
No more battery.
Yep. And it does. It works like, it absolutely works like a charm. It does what we need it to do. We locate the units when we need to. When we have a problem, yeah, BOLOs are really. I had somebody actually last week ask me, "Hey, I'm looking for this unit." They told me that I don't know who told them, but they told me, "Hey, we can put a BOLO out." And I said, "Why?" And they're like, "Because we can't find it." I go, "Is it on an RFID?" And they said, "Yeah." I go, "Don't BOLO. Give me 2 minutes." And so 2 minutes later, I said, "It's over here." And he's like, "How do you know?" I said, "Just walk over there and ask so and so with it, and he has it." And he had it. And that's all due to the RFID, and knowing the usual suspects. Everybody, I don't know what everybody's business is on this call, but if you're in manufacturing, or if you're close to logistics, I can guarantee you know who has your units when they're not where they're supposed to be. So,
Yep, for sure.
so
Yeah.
yeah. So anyways, this is kind of the whole thing about RFID. It's ERP will tell us where assets should be, and RFID tells us where assets actually are and where they were when. So um, that's that's RFID in a nutshell, and the general purpose for putting in RFID, in my opinion. And that's again, that's been my experience. I know that there's a lot more that we can do, but that's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so we have done some more stuff. Yeah, we did move it to the calibrated units. That really makes the job of trying to track down and doing a wall-to-wall for the calibrated assets a thing of the past. You can run it, and within a relatively short period of time, you know exactly where all your units are, if they're even on site. Because in a lot of cases, they've been sent off site, and so you can't find them anymore. So. And we are definitely looking for more opportunity to utilize it to actually bring some value to the expense of the insurance policy that we have. But it's definitely one of the best things that we did. And of course, we were forced to do it, but I know that it's paid dividends.
Yeah. And that's common too. I mean, typically sometimes it'll take, a fire to happen before someone puts in a tracking system, right? It has to be an audit
Hmm.
finding, or
Yeah.
GM goes nuts because something's missing or shipment gets
Hmm.
missed. But a very common path is to start with one thing, right? It's WIP, it's cycle counts, it's, tracking material at a supplier
Yeah.
site thing. And then it's like, oh, wow, the light bulb goes on. And okay, well, we've already invested in the infrastructure. What else can we do with it? And at that point, it's the marginal cost is not software or RFID tags, because we've already got all that. It's just putting the time into thinking through, okay, how can we use the system, right? Can we use the analytics from all of this traceability and pull that into our daily stand-ups? Can we start taking what we're already doing with WIP and putting it on other things? Can we track personnel? Can we use this to get visitors and have alerts go off when they're on the wrong spot, right? There's so many opportunities for what you can do with the technology. But it almost always will start with just taking one or maybe two things and saying, okay, we're going to just solve this problem, again, quickly, cost effectively, and just keep it really, 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 really simple. And then from there, there's your foundation to build. So,
Yep.
lessons learned. Yeah. What did you learn? Have you learned anything?
And passive and active, they both have their pros and cons. I believe at the end of the day, the passive was It was absolutely the right formula for us. Start small before going big. Make sure that what you're doing is actually solving the issue that you have, because in 9 times out of 10, it's an issue that you've come up with, like we were just talking about. Um, Having a roadmap is really key. Having a plan, just a plan of action. Don't just jump in. Make sure that that you have a plan, and you bring in somebody that actually knows what they're doing. Bring an expert in, because it could get real costly um, doing it yourself and thinking that you've got it, and then coming down to the end and you've spent God knows how much, and you're still not up and running. Um, so that's the big thing. And then I don't, there's not, it's not in here, but be honest with yourself when you're going through this process. And if it's not the right path, then you then change, and make sure that you're open. Just use your use your assets. So and then at the end, of course, the infrastructure is already here, so why not utilize it to the best of your ability. I do like the visitor badges. I don't know if the visitors will like the badges, but that's okay.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Questions and answers.
All right, and so we'll get started with the Q&A session. Um, let's get started with this first question here. Now that you have implemented RFID to track whip and bolos, what's next? Does the facility see an ROI beyond just tracking whips and bolos?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We were looking at implementing it at the front end when we receive the material, because we do have some blind spots before the material is bought off, and so we are looking at putting that right on the front end of the receiving. Um, there's a couple of other items. Actually, Neil and I talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's an opportunity possibly to have that RFID placed onto the boxes before they are shipped to us, the units before they're shipped to us. That would give us, we could just drop it right into the system. So we are going to explore that by the end of this year, and see if we can't have that implemented.
That's the supply chain use case, right? Where you have the
Yeah,
suppliers that will pre-affix an RFID
yeah,
onto the things that they ship, so that when they arrive, it just gets essentially staged right in with documentation, all of
yeah.
that list, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah, our biggest issue with receiving material is the documentation.
yeah,
CFCs are rarely, or they're, it's not rarely, it's a percentage of our rejects.
yeah, absolutely.
And then our next question here, with this automated system, did you receive pushback from workers that their jobs were being taken away? If so, how was this addressed, and what advice would you give to address this issue before implementation?
So we didn't get any of that pushback. We're very fortunate not to. The real, I wouldn't say pushback, but the concern was that it's going to take us longer to do our job. We're going to have to add this label onto it, and the conversation was surrounded by around um, the reason for placing these labels on there. And when even further back when we did the active. It wasn't a concern about taking the job away. It was really about everybody was aware of bolos and the pain associated. So it was welcomed, and it was kind of exciting. We were trying to figure out how far we went with it. We were dealing with one particular customer at first, and then we expanded out to our entire whip. But no, we were not concerned about that. Our staff was not concerned about that.
And how receptive was your internal IT department in working with an outside solution provider?
Yeah, there were some hoops to jump through. But once the red tape was we got through the red tape, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And again, we were trying to solve an issue, and everybody was on was on point for that. So it wasn't really difficult. The handoff between operations or my team and IT is, there's been some back and forth with that, who really owns it, and so that's always a challenge, but we always work through it. I mean, our teams are great here, so you just work through it.
Well, I'll say this too on our end, because that's something that very, very, very commonly comes up. I mean, with our company, we're sort of hyper focused on manufacturing use cases, and I would say the vast majority of our customers are in defense, in aerospace, and so for us, we're used to the infosec guys and the IT sec people saying no, 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 and needing to be convinced. And so I think something that helped, both with, CAES by Honeywell and also at other very large tier one OEMs, is that we come to it with best practices and SOC 2 certification and GovCloud and all of the sort of security posture by default. Every customer will need some amount of handholding. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot. But I don't, from our perspective, we've never not been able to implement because of a security reason. So we've always ended up at a deployment model that works pretty well for the customer. But it does, in all candor, it does sometimes take some arm pulling to get people there.
All right, and then our next question, any recommendations for tracking manufacturing sites that have open floor plans with very limited choke points?
So in some of our areas, I call them open areas, we do utilize the bus route to track or to place the readers in. We have them on columns, we have them along the wall. Again, it's along the bus route, and if you know where your material moves, you can start there and then expand out. But or reduce the number, as long as you know that you're going to get, you get 95, 98% coverage. You're going to be okay. Neil, you probably can expand on that a little bit more. You've seen.
Yeah, I just got back to Illinois. We were visiting with a company that had it's a very similar sort of thing. A very open floor plan. There's CNC machines and layup areas and storage and open racks. Sometimes what the customer will have in mind is sort of this an overlay view where you get XYZ of where everything is on the manufacturing floor. And sometimes that's a deliverable thing with, again, high reliability, but other times that's not actually what you want, because the juice there isn't always worth the squeeze. Even in open floor planes where you've got metal components that are just going to bounce the signal everywhere, you could, in theory, put, a really, really dense network of read heads over the top of the floor, turn the power way, way, way down to minimize those reflections, and get something like that. But what it almost always distills down to is we're going to look for key choke points, oftentimes at the beginning of a manufacturing step, like a CNC process. You'll have the whip that will come to rest in, a whip rack or a sort of staging area. And those are often very, very easy to capture. Other approaches that we've taken, and again, this goes back to the site survey and the system design piece, is we will track a traveler. So most shops, even in digital manufacturing age, will use a paper traveler that will go into a plastic sleeve. That might have the router, all the work instructions, maybe sometimes certificates and sign-offs and QA approvals and stuff. But another option that we'll have is to tag the traveler, not just the workpiece. And if we can track where these travelers come to rest, we can get really, really tight control. Now, the counterbalance to that is it does require some amount of consistency on the floor. So if people are just taking their travelers and whips and carts and moving them and stopping them everywhere and there's no organization, really that's going to make it difficult. But as long as there's some amount of, I won't say lean manufacturing, but just general organization, and as long as the factory floor follows a general process, even if there are reworks and those sorts of things, there is going to be a strategy to capture that information. It's just contextually dependent, right? What works for Honeywell might not work for someone else. So.
Right, and then our next question here. Did I hear you correctly that you moved from an active RFI system to a passive RFI system due to cost? How hard was that to sell to your leadership?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, the good part is that the um, the spend on the active had started to inflate, um, because we were having to add a lot of readers, or I'm sorry, um, tags, and so at the next step was to buy another. I think it was 1,000 or 1,500, and that was going to be, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 or $50,000. And at that point, there was a decision to be made, and so that's when we looked at something different. And what we also found is that we couldn't keep up with the battery replacement. It sounds like a simple thing, but when you have to pop 1,000 backs of these readers to enter, pull it out, you place it in the recycle bin, put the new one in, make sure that it works, because they're getting jumbled around too. So the the difficulty was not as great as you would think. Once we went through the whole process, and yeah, it wasn't that bad.
It's always ROI. And to
Yep.
Adam's point, oftentimes just the sheer cost of the batteries alone will
Mhm.
will more than pay for the passive system. Even if you've already bought them, just the maintenance cost can
Yeah,
be can
yeah,
be
the
painful.
maintenance was painful.
Yeah, and that's quantifiable too, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
could quantify.
Yep.
We can't get into details, but you can quantify the amount of time that you spend, right? What is the reduction in value from having tags that are offline, right? What is the
Yep.
search? If half of them are offline, you haven't realized 50% of the benefit of eliminating search times, right?
Right.
All of that is pretty easy to document generally.
Sure.
All right, and we'll answer a few more questions before we wrap things up. So if you have any more questions, you can drop them in the Q&A application at the bottom of the screen. One question we have is, how granular or detailed can you get the reads?
Neil, you want to take that, or you want me to? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I
the short answer is that they're adjustable. With a passive system, you have antennas that send the RF out. The passive tags get energized and bounce their serial number back. We have granular reads that are as little as like 2 or 3 inches away. Those are often used where we'll mount something under someone's desk to see exactly whose desk it's at, where you've got an assembler on one side of you and an assembler on the other. Other times we'll have what we call tap stations. So sometimes we will tag tools with very small tags. So things like very, very small gauges and hand tools and those sorts of things. They'll get a very, very small tag, and we don't want to be able to read it from certain angles. So we will make it so that they have to sort of tap the tool or swipe the tool in like a checkout style. The reader will beep and they'll move that on. So the short answer is it's very adjustable. In terms of how that radio is transmitted, we have curtain readers that will go more or less in a straight line and clear across a roll-up door. There are others that are more broadcast, where they'll broadcast that radio signal and capture a sort of a broad area. It just depends on the use case, but it's very, very flexible on the passive RFID side.
And then our last question here, what make of RFID readers and what type of antennas were used, circular, polarized, or linear polarized?
Adam, you want me to get that one, or do you want to answer?
absolutely, yeah. You can have fun with
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, they're all circularly polarized antennas in this particular use case. So
And then if you guys want to learn any more information on CAES by Honeywell or Factory Sense RFID, you can scan the QR codes on the screen. If you want to go to the next slide. If you have any more questions for our presenters today, you can reach out through the email addresses on the screen. If you have any more questions about AIM and our initiatives, you can reach out through the email address or visit our website, or you can give us a call. You could go to the next slide. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Neil and Adam, for presenting.
Thank you.
thank you.